Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Well, hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders with Marketing Huddle, and today we have with us executive coach Jason Treu. Welcome to the program, Jason.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Hey, you're welcome. And, looking at your bio and your background, I think we could probably spend the first 4.5 minutes on reading through everything. So let's just jump right in and just say you work with executives and you take them to the next level, and you work with a really specific type of executive. So tell us a little bit about your background and what type of clients that you work with, because these are not just, entrepreneurs that are starting off or solopreneurs. These are well-leveraged and highly successful people already that you work with to take them to the next level.
Right. So my typical client is, a vice president level above in a traditional corporation. And then it's a successful or serial entrepreneur. And some of those people are venture capital and private equity people as well. And usually what happens is that they're having some challenge that's causing them a significant amount of pain. Maybe they're at a career transition. Maybe they're having some leadership or management challenges. They might be having communication challenges amongst their team, a culture problem, trying to figure out what direction they want to go in their business. So I have a variety of challenges, but usually what happens is people are in a significant amount of pain. They feel all alone and are pretty frustrated at the process overall, and they're ready to really do something different and willing to go all in.
Yeah, we see all the time on the business shows and the Shark Tanks and whatnot that, we need to find that pain and fix it and solve it, and that's where, the true success comes. And when you say significant amount of pain, I follow along with those examples. What would be a trigger or a red flag for one of these executives that might not even know that they have a culture problem? You would help them through that, but what would be an indicator that might be a need in their organization?
Well, usually most organizations have some sort of engagement problem with their employees, and you can usually figure that out through some surveys, or you can figure out that people are not performing as high as you believe that they could be. I think a lot of it comes down to gut instinct and seeing it. I really believe every organization needs to have someone come in and help them really mold and shape their culture and really understand the piece parts put together. Because if you really look at companies today, there are very few companies that are actually getting it right. I mean, if you look at, Forbes' list of companies, there are maybe a couple that are doing an exceptional job. And then if you take a look at a small business arena, I mean, unless you've done this thing multiple times and are expert at what to do, your job as a CEO or as a C-level executive or whatever you're doing, I mean, there's so many things to do. You're not really focused on the culture per se. You're focused on whatever problems in front of you. And the problem is these challenges mount up over time, and people get frustrated because a lot of the skill sets that need to be included in a culture are soft skill sets that are not taught by any traditional schooling, education. And so if you don't get help on them, you never really get any better. And you can't really see them because they're in your blind spots, right? And per se, that's why you can't see them. So this just challenges organizations significantly. And your culture is your competitive weapon against, companies that are bigger than you or companies in your industry.
And for employee retention and things like that, because I would suspect that in any industry, the onboarding and offboarding and locating and finding new employees when they move on is quite laborious, lengthy, and as well as costly. So I think that culture is so huge, and it's kind of like I picked up on one thing you mentioned where, you feel like sometimes as a leader, do you feel like you're reacting to the issues of the day or actually being the leader that you need to be. And, you need to step out of the weeds and lead rather than being the person that people are coming to going, oop, look at this fire, let's put this one out. And I think that's really hard for a leader to recognize because, like you said, you're in it. And so how do you find that influence, that outside influence, so that you get away from being so myopic from your perspective?
Right, and I think again, the average is usually about 3 times the onboarding for a new employee cost, whatever you paid. So if an employee, you're paying them $100,000, it costs you $300,000 to replace and train them and get them back up. So there's a significant amount of money. And I think the culture thing is actually easier than people make it out to be because at the end of the day, culture is about connection. It's creating connection and it's building friendships within people within the organization. And if you look at Google, they've done a study on Project Aristotle on how do you build high-performing teams? And they looked at all of the high-performing teams that Google had across the company for a number of years. And one trait that every single team had on there was psychological safety. And psychological safety is allowing you to be vulnerable with people around you, allowing to take risks, allowing to question things, and really have people know a lot more about you as a person outside the office. And you just have to facilitate that in different ways in order to ensure that starts happening. And you can build a culture alone off of that, right? I mean, having a vision and values and other things that are concrete and orchestrated are really important. And a small company, if you want to look at them, called Meet Edgar, does a great job at that. They have a website where they publicly show all of these things and their vision and values. And the company is probably I want to say 15 or 20 people, and it's probably better articulated than most public companies are. So it doesn't take a rock star to do some of these things. You just don't know what to do. And you've got to create that feeling because if you look at the stats, people who have at least one best friend at work, they're 7 times more productive. And Google found in their study that people that all have, the 5 characteristics and they have to have psychological safety, they're, been twice as likely to be recommended by a Google executive to stand out amongst their employees. And every single one of those high-performing teams produced more revenue and produced more innovation than other teams did inside of Google, right? And we're talking about one of the top companies producing and attracting talent. So that's telling you something that this works. And it's not in 99% of companies. You will not find that. I mean, I have one client like that. If I walk into a company anywhere else, you probably would never see that inside of the company, psychological safety being able even that high of a level.
Yeah, and I love when you can point your finger at one element and then look at a bullet point list of all the benefits, from the monetary to the longevity to employee retention. And so psychological safety is really interesting. So here's a question that makes me think of, how do you notice that in an organization from the outside looking in? Because you certainly aren't going to come in and just ask probing questions and you're going to get strange looks. But then B, if you're an organization that feels like we don't have that, we want to start that, you can't just jump in with 2 feet and have 30 initiatives started to create this, because then it feels unnatural, right? So I'm sure there's a easing in process that you would recommend clients begin with.
Well, Google struggled for several years to figure this out. So, I mean, this is a really hard problem to identify. I think you have to go in and take a look at individual teams and see how they work together, see how they communicate and collaborate. I also think you can tell just by the culture and really understanding, are people going out to do stuff after work? What is the culture like in terms of, are people going out to lunch? Are they spending time together? Do people in the company know a lot about their colleagues and their personal lives and what's really going on? How do their managers manage people? I mean, you could start to get a pretty good look and feel on organizations that are more closely aligned with that than not right when you walk in. And it's so rare to find it that I think you're looking at the needle in the haystack. So I think that if you took I just don't think there are that many companies out there that you're really going to find it. And I think what you have to do is facilitate more of those things. And it's funny because I created a game called that I've actually run in a lot of clients that's been off a proven study by Arthur Aaron and his game called Cards of Connection. And what it is in 45 minutes, you basically go through like Cards Against Humanity, and it's asking questions that you answer yourself on questions like, what was your favorite summer job and why, right? Or in deeper level questions like, what was the most meaningful year of your life and what happened in it, right? And you give, short answers of, 2 to 3 minutes maximum. And it's amazing how much you learn about colleagues. And after they did this study that they've ran dozens of times, the average amount of people walking out of this study, 30 to 40% of the people say that they felt close or closer to the people in the room than with anyone that they have in their life today. 45 minutes. You can create the closest relationship you have in your life walking out of that room. You will find someone in that room. I've been doing it in a big enough room, and it's amazing. And these were just one-on-one, too. These were not groups.
Sure.
So these were 2 people doing it, and that many people said it. So you can do this thing quickly if you orchestrate it and want to do it. And the results are phenomenal, right? Because those are the people that are up at 2 a.m. answering emails. Those are the people that will work 70 hours a week versus 40. And that's the difference in your company, and those people that will care about people and outcomes much more. So the people that say this doesn't matter, like they don't know the research, and they're not really looking at the business side of things. They're doing it because they think in their head that analytical, smart people win. But the reality is when you look at what people rate as the top managers and leaders on any study and any number of things, intelligence and performance aren't now almost not even on the list. It's all soft skills, up and down. So these things matter, and I think most corporations and small businesses are not thinking about this because they've been told that other things matter, and they believe them without actually looking at the data and the science that actually refute this.
But it sounds to me like if someone does realize that it matters and wants to take that initiative to start that implementing it in their firm, it doesn't sound like it's that big of a cumbersome task, but I would suspect that it's something that once you get started, you better get going, because it's kind of like the old analogy I know I've used over the years, the boss just came back from that conference and now we got to do all these new things, but don't worry, give them 2 weeks and it'll, just kind of fade away into the sunset because, it was just today's shiny object. So you don't want to have this kind of an initiative started and then lose its luster and momentum. So what do you recommend that firms do to make sure that once you get this momentum started, that you can keep it going, so that then the employees of the company feel like this is now leading toward becoming part of our culture?
It has to be part of the vision and values, and it has to be prioritized by the executive team and embodied by them, and especially the CEO of the company. And if it's not, it won't work. It doesn't matter. You can't start this as a director or middle management level initiative. You can start to raise it at that level, but if the senior executive team does not put resources, time, and believe it and live it and do it, it won't work. And frankly, your company will underperform what it can be no matter what the outcomes are in the organization. I think, again, if we go back to Google, there's never been a company in the history that we've seen at this point to have as many innovations and get in as many different businesses and try as many things. Now, like a lot of those things don't work, but as the size of business they are, they have to hit like a triple grand slam for it to really matter. So they've got to do a lot of things in order to make something work. But they do, and they keep getting high-performing employees, and they keep getting ranked as, the top workforce, top company to work for. And frankly, there's a lot of companies there that have just as much money. Apple, Facebook, they have the money that Google has to spend on this stuff. So it's not such the problem is is the management and executive team, they don't believe the same way Google does, and they don't put it in the vision and values, and it doesn't end up that way. That's what it comes down to.
Well, it really does, and I think that has applications in our personal lives as well, because haven't there been so many times that we've seen friends that said, I just don't have time for that, whatever, fill in the blank of whatever this thing is. But you're sitting there thinking, well, but you went to this last weekend, you had this and that yesterday, and you have time to do the things you want to do. It's just, it's not that priority. So it really feeds back into what you just said on the priority of the organization. They need to see the benefit so that they can put that in on their kind of close radar and get it going, because it's not, it doesn't have to be cumbersome. It doesn't have to be expensive, but you have to realize, what's the why behind it. And at that point, then you kind of get that vision, and then it moves forward. So what would you say is a good way that an organization should, find out if their purpose and vision and mission are, dialed in right where it needs to be, or should they be doing some tweaks to that? What's a good indicator that way?
Well, I think part of it is you need outside help to do this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because you're not running the company, you can't see things for what they are because you're too close to it. And, unless you're a CEO that's been a serial entrepreneur and been involved in designing cultures and doing it, you're not the expert. That's not what you have the vision, but someone has to help you crystallize what it is on paper and also help you crystallize what are the values, right? They may be inside of you, but bring them out. And then you need to orchestrate a plan and share it with the rest of the company, and then figure out how you can create this and put this in the DNA of a company, and then manage it on a week-to-week, month-to-month basis, right? And I don't necessarily think it takes that much time, but it takes some other help in order to make this all happen and work, because it's just not something that people are used to doing successfully or even doing at all. And I think then you can just move it forward. And I think it starts simply like that. You've got to crystallize what are the vision and values, and you've got to hold people accountable, like in performance reviews, in hiring. I mean, a lot of the problem is people mouth these things, but they don't actually do them, right? They don't actually fire people that don't perform to the value. So of high-performing people, all the time you see this in companies. Like, so I see this time and time again. People will have high-performing salespeople that do not embody the values, but people are too afraid to fire them because they think the company will fall down. Well, what happens, everyone in the company sees, these are jokes, right? Like, Why do I have a value? If the people that are doing well don't have any rules, then why should I, right? Well, then what happens is you don't have a culture, and that's what most organizations don't, or they write it down, and the CEO never looks at it. He doesn't even know what it is. He doesn't even know what the values are, let alone the rest of the management team. So that's really comes down to the problem, is buying into it and living it on a day-to-day basis. And I don't think you can do that internally, because you just need help in order to orchestrate that and make it top of mind, and then have someone else keep reminding you that it has to be integrated into the fabric of your company, every decision that you make and everything that you do.
I know it sounds cliche to say, you need outside help, but sorry, so many times we are myopic to what is right in front of us because we're used to it day in and day out. And I was literally talking to someone this morning that we're on their website, and I said, we just put this right here, but I noticed, look at this phrase, it just doesn't read right. And to them, it was they knew what it should say, but from the outside perspective, it was like, we just need to make it plural, not singular. And so many times we have that in our business, whether it's a process or a vision or a mission or the way we do things. So I think that is so key. And so I would ask at this point, what's the best way that some listeners can reach out and start the conversation with you, learn a little bit more about your processes, and maybe find out more about how you could impact their organization?
Sure. You can go to my website, and that's jasontreu.com, and it's JASONTREU.com. It's JASONTREU.com, and it's pronounced Troy, but my parents never changed the spelling or pronunciation, so I'm left with that. So it's a little bit more challenging.
Excellent. So I'll make sure we have that on the show notes page, and so people can go right there. And Jason, thank you so much for your time. It's just huge, deep concepts that I think you may really simplified and really good perspective. So thank you so much for your time today.
Hey, thanks for having me on the show.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.